Well, if you're on active duty in Air Weather Service or perhaps recently retired, this is a very familiar scene to you because over the past few years, we have begun to incorporate videotapes into our Commander's Call program. Now, that gives me the opportunity to keep our people up to date on the issues no matter where they serve throughout the world. And this is the 5th in our series of videotapes, and it's a very special edition because we're recognizing the fact that Air Weather Service is 50 years old this year. 50 years of proud service beginning 1 July 1937, running through 1 July 1987. And I think it's appropriate that we begin this videotape here in a base weather station because the hallmark of our organization for the last 50 years has certainly been our people and the service they provide. Service in a base weather station, typical of that of Tech Sergeant Vince Adams, here supporting the 7th Bomb Wing at Carswell. People of all grades and all ranks serving for the last 50 years have made just an outstanding contribution to our Department of Defense mission. And that's really who we want to recognize today, the people of Air Weather Service, past, present, and certainly into the future. This videotape is dedicated to you. We hope you enjoy it.
July 1st, 1937 is celebrated as the birthday of Air Weather Service. But 20 years earlier, 300 Army Signal Corps weathermen saw action in France, providing weather support to the American Expeditionary Force during World War I. The golden fleur-de-lis and the Air Weather Service emblem commemorates that service. The most vocal and forceful advocate for a separate Army Air Corps Weather Service was Captain Randolph Pinky Williams. He's considered to be the founder of today's Air Weather Service. It was largely through his efforts that the War Department transferred responsibility for weather support of the Army's Air Arm to the Army's Air Corps on July 1st, 1937. It was Captain Williams who recommended First Lieutenant Robert Losey as the first chief of the new Army Air Corps Weather Service. From the beginning, the Weather Service had a worldwide responsibility, with 3 weather regions in the continental United States and 3 overseas service squadrons. Just 2 months after the new Weather Service was established, 25 students began classes at a new weather school at Patterson Field, Ohio. The 5-month course taught by Captain Don McNeil and staff included weather forecasting, weather station operations, college physics, and algebra. The first Weather Observer course opened at Scott Field, Illinois in September 1939, and by late 1940, both schools had been moved to Chanute Field as part of the Air Corps Technical School.
Well, the shots of the theodolites and the balloons and the instrument shelters are still familiar to some of us today because they're still used in some phases of Air Weather Service operations, although they're being phased out in favor of more modern capabilities. But the early reference to Chanute Field, and the training of our people at the Chinook Tech Training Center has a familiar ring yet today. But during that period from 1937 to 1940, that training was particularly important because as we entered World War II, weather and weather service became a very critical factor.
The Japs knew about weather too. In December 1941, there was plenty of stormy weather in the Pacific. They used it well. Weather, stormy weather to conceal the Jap Navy, and clouds to hang like a curtain and mask the air approach over Oahu. The weather, December 7, 1941, was not neutral. When the United States entered the war, the armed services had comparatively few weather stations. By July 1943, the Army Air Force alone operated more than 600 stations.
To fill the need for trained weather officers as well as enlisted forecasters and observers, a unique aviation meteorological cadet program was established at several universities, including MIT and NYU. This program eventually produced about 5,000 weather officers. More weathermen were trained at the Army Air Corps Weather Training Center at Grand Rapids, Michigan. In less than 11 months, a teaching staff of about 400, including Captain Harry Wexler and Lieutenants Jacob Fulmer and William Kellogg, trained almost 2,500 meteorological cadets and enlisted weathermen. For the first 2 years of the war, weather forecasters were dependent on pilot balloon observations for upper wind data. Then, in December 1943, the first practical Raywin sonde system began reaching the field. The SCR-658 provided high-altitude wind information even above the clouds and represented a giant step forward in meteorology. Observations and forecast were key to nearly every operation and battle of World War II. Colonel Donald Yates and Group Captain James Stagg helped make what was perhaps the most famous weather forecast ever issued, the English Channel and the French coast on the morning of June 6, 1944. D-Day, the Allied cross-channel invasion of France.
The meteorologists at Supreme Headquarters had to be right. The invasion, the war, depended on them. Shortly before 3 a.m. of the 6th of June, 1944, General Dwight D. Eisenhower received the day's weather forecast. Low clouds, waves high in the channel, and relatively mild on the beaches. Improved weather forecast for the following days. The moment of decision rested on one man, and his decision was
the first American weathermen to reach France in the pre-dawn darkness of D-Day were Sergeant Charlie Staub, who parachuted with an element of the 101st Airborne Division, Corporal Warren F. Wolfe, who went in with a glider unit, and Staff Sergeant Robert A. Dodson, who jumped in with elements of the 82nd Airborne Division.
We landed in Normandy with every available piece of equipment. But it was the overcast day with the generally unfavorable weather conditions that made the unsung contribution. It masked the landings both by sea and by air, and surprised the enemy, who thought we would have required better weather. After the invasion, General Eisenhower wrote on the back of a weather memo, "Thanks, and thank the gods of war we went when we did." Signed, D.E.
Another critical forecast was made after Army Air Force's weathermen painstakingly screened 40 years' worth of weather maps to find the best period for raids against the Polesti oil refineries in Romania. Captain Leon Johnson, another early Air Weather Service member, was awarded the Medal of Honor for leading a bomber group against Ploesti. By mid-1944, the Army Air Corps Weather Service had expanded to more than 19,000 people, including members of the Women's Army Corps and Women's Air Force Service pilots. Night flights over the Himalayas were pioneered by Colonel Richard Ellsworth and other members of the 10th Weather Squadron, such as Lieutenants Dale Flinders, Charles Lewis, and Master Sergeant William Cady. Their efforts helped make Flying the Hump a 24-hour-a-day operation. Ellsworth Air Force Base was later named in honor of Colonel Ellsworth. When the B-29 Enola Gay lifted off from a small Pacific island on August 6, 1945, the pilot was under instructions to select one of 3 potential targets based on cloud cover reports from the weather planes preceding him. Army Air Force weather forecasters Ed Buxton and Major Joshua Holland prepared the preliminary and final target forecast. But weather sealed the fate of Hiroshima when B-29 weather scouts reported only 2/10 cloud cover.
Well, I found some particularly familiar footage in that section of Air Weather Service, and that was the reference to the Pantline Hotel in Grand Rapids, Michigan, because I grew up just a few blocks from the Pantline Hotel, but it wasn't until many years later, till I entered the Air Force and Air Weather Service, that I realized the part the Pantline Hotel had played in the training of our people during World War II. But now we turn to the post-World War II era. We turn to the development of the Air Force, because we're celebrating the 40th anniversary of the Air Force this year. And we had a short respite then from World War II, and then Air Weather Service was again prominently involved in weather support during the Korean conflict and subsequently in Vietnam.
In 1947, the United States Air Force became a separate service, and the Air Weather Service was formally charged with providing all meteorological support to the Air Force and operational weather support to the Army. One of the first major challenges to face the young Air Force was the Berlin airlift that began in June 1948. It also brought significant challenges to Air Weather Service forecasters of the 18th Weather Squadron and the 2105th Air Weather Group, who had to predict unexpected summer rains and harsh winter weather that often included low clouds, fog, freezing rain, turbulence, and icing. Weather was the single greatest threat to the 17-month airlift. Less than 48 hours after North Korean troops invaded South Korea in June 1950, a weather detachment had been airlifted from Japan to Daegu to furnish weather information to the United Nations forces. During the conflict, centralized weather support from the 30th Weather Squadron facilities in Seoul not only provided products for the 5th Air Force, but for ground forces of the 8th Army. After Korea, changes in Air Weather Service continued with increasing speed. Air Weather Service was reorganized from the geographical alignment in which it was originally established to a functional arrangement still in use today. In July 1950, an AWS RB-29 crew discovered a huge drifting ice floe in the Arctic that was later named Fletcher's Ice Island. Lieutenant Colonel Joseph Fletcher and many other weathermen established a semi-permanent weather station on the drifting ice colossus. It was in the 1950s that technology began changing the way Air Weather Service operated. Before the CPS-9 appeared in base weather stations, forecasters who had radar used airborne sets that had been adapted to ground use for severe weather detection. But perhaps the most important technological improvement of the 50s was the computerization of Air Weather Service. The daily production of regular computer-generated forecast for North America began at the Joint Numerical Weather Prediction Unit and was hailed as the most significant advance in weather prediction in 30 years. The Joint Numerical Weather Prediction Unit at Suitland, Maryland closed in 1957, and its resources were combined with the Offutt Global Weather Central. With increasing computer power, the Offutt Central grew into the Air Force Global Weather Central we know today. It was 1958, after almost 10 years in the Military Air Transport Service Headquarters building at Andrews Air Force Base, Maryland, that Air Weather Service Headquarters was moved with its parent command to Scott Air Force Base, Illinois, where it remains today. About the same time, Air Weather Service support to the Army was highlighted by the activation of 2 weather support squadrons dedicated exclusively to Army support. They were the 7th Weather Squadron at Heidelberg, Germany, and the 16th Weather Squadron at Fort Monroe, Virginia. In the early 60s, AWS established a network of meteorological rocket stations to answer increased scientific data requirements at altitudes up to 50 miles. Technicians fired ARCAs and later Loki rockets bearing instrument packages that were tracked electronically as they returned to Earth by parachute. While rocket sons were providing data from the upper atmosphere, a new high-speed automated weather network became operational. The ON connected weather centrals at Fuchu Air Station, Japan, High Wycombe, England, and the Global Weather Central at Offutt Air Force Base, Nebraska. From an initial cadre of 23 weathermen temporarily deployed to Vietnam in December 1961, Air Weather Service involvement grew to a weather group and 3 squadrons by 1966. During the first 6 months of 1966, weathermen in Vietnam issued almost 30,000 target forecasts, more than 5 times as many as the same period the year before. Soon after it was introduced, the Defense Meteorological Satellite Program was hailed as the greatest innovation of the Vietnam War. Transportable direct readout sites enabled forecasters to receive DMSP data as the satellite passed overhead, and then process high-resolution visual and infrared imagery. November 20th, 1970, the date of the daring night raid by a small U.S. force on the prisoner of war camp at Son Tay, deep in North Vietnam. The date was determined by a climatological study and forecast provided by AWS people, led by Major Keith R. Grimes. By the end of the war, AWS units had earned or shared 7 Presidential Unit citations, 8 Republic of Vietnam Gallantry Crosses with palms, 50 campaign streamers, 16 Air Force Outstanding Unit Awards, and 10 more with Combat V devices. But in Vietnam, as in all wars, service is balanced by sacrifice, as we remember our fallen comrades.
Well, that's a touching tribute to the sacrifices it's taken to build the weather service we have today and then provide the weather service during 3 wars over the past 50 years. But now we're going to shift to the post-Vietnam era. And the focus is on people and technology. Technology and the building of new capabilities that we're bringing in today, and as ever, the important role that people are playing in the service that we provide.
In late 1964, the first FPS-77 storm detection weather radar, similar to this set, was delivered to Griffiss Air Force Base, New York for testing. In 1968, Chief Master Sergeant William Gardner became the first Special Assistant to the AWS Commander for Airman Affairs, a title later changed to Chief Master Sergeant of AWS, then Senior Airman Advisor, and finally to Senior Enlisted Advisor. And in 1971, the newly created position of Chief Scientist at AWS headquarters was filled by Dr. Robert Fletcher, who had served for many years as Director of Scientific Services. More than 33 years of organized aerial weather reconnaissance ended September 1st, 1975, with the transfer of the Weather Reconnaissance Mission and resources to the Aerospace Rescue and Recovery Service. Over the years, many aircraft types were flown by the Air Weather Service in its reconnaissance and air sampling missions. The return to a basic weather watch from a continuous weather watch conducted from 109 representative observation sites was completed in the late 70s, resulting in the loss of hundreds of weather observer spaces. A different kind of observations began at the Air Weather Service Solar Observatory at Lermouth and extreme northwestern Australia in 1979. Larimonth's unique geographic location and both optical and radio telescopes make it a key element in the AWS Space Environmental Support System. This worldwide network provides almost all environmental support above the stratosphere for the Department of Defense. This information is used to support long-range communications, early warning radars, satellite command and control, and manned space operations. Air Weather Service provided support of a different kind in late 1983. For Operation Urgent Fury, the military rescue of U.S. civilians on the island of Grenada, Air Weather Service people provided support that ranged from planning through deployment and returning home. In early 1985, the Advanced Weather Analysis and Prediction System, or AWAPS, became operational at Air Force Global Weather Central. Using a Cray XMP supercomputer, analysis and forecast products are available 100 times faster than earlier systems. Another system recently installed at the Air Force Global Weather Central is the Satellite Data Handling System. SDHS is replacing light tables and hand-drawn grease pencil maps with satellite workstations and top-quality video. SDHS moves mainframe computer actions to a network of mini-computers, letting forecasters call up and work with only the specific data they need. To meet the increasingly sophisticated requirements our customers will have in the future, we need new and faster means of providing weather support. By the mid-1990s, the next generation weather radar will be protecting military installations around the globe. NEXRAD will double the operator's ability to detect severe weather while reducing the false alarm rate to 1/3 of what that rate is with the present radars. Another improvement that will help Air Weather Service move off the wall and into electronics will be the automated weather distribution system. AWID's ultimate goal is to streamline base weather station operations, enable forecasters to more easily integrate a large volume of information, and prove the technical base for more advanced capabilities in the future. The future of the Air Weather Service also includes a plan for a weather officer in space. This experiment, involving an Air Weather Service meteorologist flying on a space shuttle mission, will evaluate the potential for expert environmental assessment from a space platform to enhance and support the AWS mission.
Well, you see what we've done. We've tried to develop Air Weather Service from pre-World War II in segments right up to the present time. But there's a few things we've left out, so now we're going to go back and give you a quick montage of shots stretching over that 50-year period of people, places, and things. And you probably recognize a few, and we hope you enjoy it. Well, we had a big challenge. How do you capture the essence of 50 years of very proud service into a 30-minute videotape? It's actually impossible. But we hope in the time that you viewed this videotape, we've either rekindled a few memories or certainly given you an insight into why we're very proud to have been a part of an Air Weather Service mission that's been providing outstanding service for 50 years now. But you know, the 50th anniversary of Air Weather Service is less significant than another anniversary that we're observing this year, but they're both linked together. This is the 200th anniversary of our Constitution. And you may recall in the preamble of the Constitution, our forefathers challenged us. And they challenged us to provide for the common defense, to help keep our people free. And that's really what it's all about. And that's what we've been about for 50 years, helping to provide for a strong defense and helping to keep our people free. For those of you who have served in the past, we thank you for your contributions in building a strong air weather service. For those of us currently on active duty, we pledge our commitment to those in the future to leave the same kind of legacy, a strong air weather service continuing to provide for a very proud service to our nation. We hope you've enjoyed this tape again. Thanks for your service to your nation and to Air Weather Service.